Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The sun dipped low over the vast expanse of the Emerald Dream, its soft, golden light spilling through the dense canopy of ancient trees. Shafts of sunlight filtered through leaves, creating dancing patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. Birds chirped in the distance, their melodies mixing with the rustling of the wind through the branches. The air was thick with the scent of pine, moss, and damp earth, a sensory reminder of the life pulsing beneath the surface. But beneath that surface, something was wrong. Elder Theric stood on the edge of a cliff that overlooked a wide valley nestled within the dream. His large, hooved feet were planted firmly on the ground, the dark fur covering his muscular body swaying gently with the breeze. His horns, thick and curling upward, glistened in the fading light. Clad in the simple, earthen robes of a druid, Theric radiated a quiet strength, his deep connection to nature palpable to all who stood near him. Yet today, he felt no peace. Today, the Emerald Dream felt different. Behind him, the Tauren Druids prepared for war. The once serene landscape had become a battlefield of tensions. For weeks, signs of the growing conflict had emerged: unnatural withering of plants, strange and erratic movements of animals, and a heavy, oppressive energy hanging in the air. Theric had sensed it long before the others. Something dark had taken root here, feeding off the unrest that grew between his people and the werewolves. He narrowed his eyes as he looked toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, in the thick of the forest, the werewolf tribe prepared for battle as well. Both sides claimed dominion over this part of the Emerald Dream, and both were prepared to fight for it. You feel it too, don't you? The voice of Lingerie, Theric's closest advisor, broke the silence. She approached him with a grace and calm that seemed out of place in the midst of impending war. Her eyes, deep brown and wise, met his as she stood beside him. Theric nodded, his gaze never leaving the horizon. It grows stronger every day. The balance is breaking. The werewolves blame us. They think our druidic rituals are corrupting the dream. They refuse to listen, and now they gather their forces, Lingerie said, her voice tinged with sorrow. Theric's broad shoulders sagged slightly. He had seen many conflicts in his long life, but none had troubled him as deeply as this one. The Emerald Dream was sacred to them all, and to see it tainted by war was a deep wound to his soul. It's not just the werewolves, Theric murmured, more to himself than to Lingerie. There's something else. Something darker. Before Lingerie could respond, a sudden rustling in the underbrush caught their attention. A scout emerged from the trees, his fur matted with sweat and his breathing labored. Elder Theric. The scout gasped, dropping to one knee. The werewolves. They've made their move. They've crossed into the sacred grove. Our forces are preparing for battle. Theric clenched his fists, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his broad chest. He had hoped to avoid war, to find a way to restore balance without bloodshed, but it seemed fate had other plans. Ready the Druids, Theric said, his voice firm despite the conflict within him. We must protect the sacred grove. If we lose it, we lose the heart of the dream. Lingerie bowed her head and turned to relay the orders. As she left, Theric took one last look at the valley below, the tension in the air thickening with every passing second. The sacred grove was the center of the Emerald Dream's power, and if the werewolves took control of it, the balance would be shattered. With a heavy heart, Theric turned and made his way back toward the camp. His hooves made a soft thud against the earth as he walked, each step carrying the weight of his people's future. The Tauren Druids moved in unison, preparing their spells, gathering their forces, and readying themselves for the inevitable clash. Far to the east, the werewolves were preparing in their own way. The dense underbrush of the Emerald Dream seemed to bend and twist to accommodate their swift movements. Ragnar, the alpha of the werewolf tribe, led his people with an iron fist, his towering form moving with a predatory grace through the thick forest. His dark fur bristled in anticipation, his yellow eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. The Tauren Druids had claimed the Emerald Dream as their domain, their magic and rituals slowly encroaching on the werewolves' ancestral lands. To Ragnar, this was an unforgivable insult. His people were the true protectors of nature, not these cowards who hid behind spells and rituals. The werewolves were the embodiment of nature's primal force, and they would not be pushed aside. Alpha, a werewolf scout called out, running up to Ragnar and dropping to one knee. The Tauren are gathering at the sacred grove. They're preparing for war. Ragnar let out a low growl, his sharp teeth bared in a menacing grin. Good, he rumbled. Let them come. We will show them the true power of nature. The werewolves moved silently through the trees, their bodies low to the ground as they approached the sacred grove. The moon hung high in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows across the forest floor. Ragnar could feel the energy of the emerald dream pulsing beneath his feet, the raw power of nature coursing through him. As they neared the grove, the air grew heavy with tension. The Tauren Druids stood in a wide circle around the ancient tree at the center of the grove, their hands raised as they chanted in unison. The ground beneath them shimmered with magical energy, a barrier of protection that the werewolves would have to break through. Ragnar's lips curled in a snarl. He could feel the magic in the air, a thick, oppressive force that made his fur stand on end. The Tauren's rituals were unnatural, a violation of the Emerald Dream's natural order. It was time to put an end to it. With a guttural roar, Ragnar charged forward, his massive form barreling through the underbrush. His warriors followed suit, their bodies moving as one as they descended upon the sacred grove. The Tauren were ready. As the werewolves approached, the Druids unleashed their magic. Vines shot up from the ground, thick and writhing, wrapping around the werewolves and pulling them to the earth. Elemental spirits materialized from the air, their forms shimmering with raw power as they lashed out at the intruders. But the werewolves were not so easily defeated. Ragnar tore through the vines with his claws, his powerful limbs breaking free of the magical restraints. He leapt into the fray, his jaws snapping at the nearest druid, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. The battle was fierce. Tauren and werewolves clashed in a whirlwind of fur, claws, and magic. The air crackled with energy as spells were cast, the ground shaking beneath the weight of the conflict. Ragnar fought with the fury of a cornered beast, his eyes locked on the ancient tree at the center of the grove. If he could destroy the tree, the source of the Tauren's power, the battle would be won. But as he charged toward the tree, a sudden force knocked him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs as he looked up to see Therek standing over him, his eyes glowing with the power of the Emerald Dream. "You do not understand what you're doing, Ragnar," Therek said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "This battle will not bring balance, it will only bring destruction." Ragnar snarled, his body tensing as he prepared to strike. "You've already destroyed the balance with your magic. We are the true protectors of the dream." Therek's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of sadness passing over his features. "There is something darker at work here, Ragnar. We are not each other's enemies." Before Ragnar could respond, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath them. Both leaders froze, their eyes widening in shock as the earth split open near the ancient tree, a thick black mist pouring out from the crack. The mist coiled and twisted like a living thing, its dark tendrils wrapping around the tree's roots, suffocating the natural energy that flowed through it. What is that?" Ragnar muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. Therek's face darkened as he stepped closer to the mist, his hand outstretched toward the tree. "The nightmare," he whispered. "It's been here all along." The dark mist spread quickly, corrupting everything it touched. The once vibrant foliage of the sacred grove withered and died, the tree's bark turning black and brittle. The air grew thick with a stench of decay, the oppressive energy of the nightmare filling every corner of the grove. Ragnar stumbled back, his mind racing as the truth began to sink in. This was not the work of the Tauren. This was something far more sinister, something that had been feeding off their conflict, growing stronger with each passing day. "We have to stop it," Therek said, his voice filled with urgency. "If the nightmare consumes the Emerald Dream, Everything we hold dear will be lost. Ragnar clenched his fists, his mind still reeling from the revelation. But there was no time for doubt. If they didn't act now, the entire Emerald Dream would fall. Then we fight, Ragnar growled, his eyes burning with determination. Together. The moon hung high in the night sky, its pale light casting an eerie glow over the Emerald Dream. The battlefield was eerily silent, the usual sounds of the forest replaced by the tense anticipation of the impending clash. The Tauren Druids and the Werewolf tribe stood on opposite sides of the sacred grove, their gazes locked in mutual defiance. The ancient tree in the center, a symbol of the dream's life force, seemed to pulse with an uneasy energy, reflecting the turmoil of the conflict. Ragnar's eyes were sharp and focused. He had gathered his most trusted warriors, each one a hulking figure of strength and primal fury. Their fur bristled in the cool night air, and their claws gleamed under the moonlight. Ragnar raised his hand, signaling his people to prepare for the assault. The Tauren, led by Therek, were equally resolute. Their druidic powers were at the ready, their connection to the natural world evident in the way the trees seemed to sway and bend in response to their presence. The Druids stood in a circle, chanting softly as they called upon the spirits of the land. The air around them crackled with raw energy, the ground vibrating with the power of their magic. Without warning, the first strike was launched. A guttural howl from the werewolves shattered the silence, and the warriors charged forward with a feral intensity. Claws swiped through the air, and teeth bared as they clashed with the Tauren Druids. The forest erupted into chaos, the sounds of battle mixing with the cries of pain and the rustle of displaced foliage. Therek moved with a measured grace, his staff swinging in precise arcs as he summoned vines to ensnare the werewolf warriors. The thick, green tendrils erupted from the ground, wrapping around limbs and pulling the attackers to the earth. The Druids chanted louder, their voices rising in a symphony of power that called forth storms and lightning to strike their foes. Ragnar roared as he leapt into the fray, his massive form barreling through the druidic barriers. He was a force of nature himself, his sheer strength making him a daunting opponent. His claws, sharp and deadly, slashed through the vines and struck out at the Druids with ruthless efficiency. He was a blur of movement, a beast in his element, fighting not just for territory but for what he believed was a sacred duty. As the battle raged on, both sides began to realize that their conflict was not only devastating the forest but also disrupting the delicate balance of the Emerald Dream. The once vibrant landscape was now scarred with the marks of war: burned trees, shattered rocks, and scorched earth. The very essence of the dream seemed to be wilting under the strain of their violence. In the midst of the chaos, Therek's attention was drawn to a growing darkness. From the heart of the grove, an ominous black mist began to seep through the ground. It twisted and coiled like a living thing, spreading outwards and consuming everything in its path. The Druids, sensing the disturbance, halted their attacks and turned their gaze towards the encroaching shadow. "What is this?" Therek shouted, his voice filled with disbelief and concern. The mist pulsed with a malevolent energy, and its presence seemed to sap the very strength from the Druid's magic. Ragnar, too, was forced to stop and stare at the growing darkness. His fierce expression faltered as he recognized the threat. "This isn't us," he growled, his voice tinged with frustration. "We're fighting for the wrong reason." The realization hit them both like a tidal wave. The true enemy was not each other but the darkness that was consuming their world. Therek and Ragnar exchanged a look of grim understanding, their earlier animosity replaced by a shared determination. They had to set aside their differences and confront this new threat together. With a commanding gesture, Therek called his druids to regroup. "Cease the attack," he ordered, his voice echoing through the grove. "We must focus on this new threat." The Druids, though weary and battered, obeyed. They gathered around Therek, their magical energies converging as they attempted to push back the encroaching darkness. The air crackled with power as they worked in unison, their chants rising in a desperate bid to repel the mist. Ragnar raised his hand, signaling his warriors to fall back. "Form up. he commanded. "We need to find the source of this darkness and destroy it." The werewolves, though still growling with aggression, complied. They regrouped and moved as one, their senses alert to the shifting energies around them. Ragnar led them towards the heart of the mist, his eyes scanning for any sign of the source. The darkness seemed to pulse and writhe, as if it were alive. It grew thicker and more repressive, making it difficult to see or breathe. The very ground beneath their feet felt corrupted, and an unsettling chill filled the air. As they ventured deeper into the mist, they came upon a clearing. At its center stood a twisted, gnarled tree, a stark contrast to the ancient tree they had fought over earlier. This new tree was warped and corrupted, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The black mist emanated from its roots, spreading outwards and suffocating the life around it. "This must be the source," Therek said, his voice grim. "The nightmare is using this tree to spread its corruption." Ragnar nodded, his expression resolute. "We need to destroy it." Together, the Druids and werewolves formed a circle around the corrupted tree, their combined energies converging on the dark presence. Therek chanted an incantation, his voice steady as he wove a powerful spell. The Druids' magic surged forth, intertwining with the primal force of the werewolves' strength. The ground shook as they focused their efforts on the tree, their combined power creating a blinding light. The darkness around the tree recoiled, its tendrils retracting as the light grew stronger. The corrupted tree groaned and twisted, its branches cracking and splintering under the strain. The mist began to dissipate, retreating back into the shadows from whence it came. With a final, blinding flash, the tree erupted in a burst of energy. The corrupted wood splintered and disintegrated, the last remnants of the nightmare's influence vanishing into the night. The forest fell silent, the oppressive energy lifting as the dark mist was purged. Exhausted but victorious, Therek and Ragnar stood amidst the remnants of the battle. The Emerald Dream, though scarred, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The sacred grove began to heal, the once dying plants slowly regaining their vitality. "Is it over?" Ragnar asked, his voice tired but hopeful. Therek nodded. "For now." "The nightmare has been driven back, but we must remain vigilant. The balance of the Emerald Dream is delicate, and we must protect it together." Ragnar extended his hand, a gesture of peace and alliance. "Then let us guard it together." Therek grasped Ragnar's hand firmly. "Agreed. From now on, we are allies in this fight." The two leaders looked out over the forest, their eyes reflecting a newfound understanding. The Emerald Dream was a realm of incredible beauty and fragile balance, and it was their duty to safeguard it. As dawn approached, the first light of morning filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow over the recovering forest. The battle has been fierce, but the unity forged in the heat of conflict had created a bond that would protect the Emerald Dream for generations to come. And so, with the darkness defeated and the land beginning to heal, the Tauren Druids and the werewolf tribe set about rebuilding what had been lost. Their shared struggle had forged a new alliance, one built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to the preservation of their sacred world. Together, they stood as guardians of the Emerald Dream, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.